Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, Season 2 is right around the corner for Diablo 4, and it looks like there are a fair few people willing to give this season a chance and see how it feels. If you are looking to do the same and are specifically wanting to go for a rogue this season, you may well be wondering what has changed and what the ideal path is to start off your gameplay situation. The initial 50 levels or so of your game time will be smaller than the 50 to 100 section, sure, but it is important to get started off right. Of course, when trying a new class, there's nothing wrong with just using whatever abilities you think are cool, but everyone knows the real game, the real builds, and the real fun synergies all start unlocking when you hit higher world tiers, so the fastest way to get there is obviously ideal. So today we're going to go over the best rogue leveling build to get yourself up to level 50 in Season 2. Those who checked out our rogue build last season will recognize it for the most part, as unlike many classes, rogue actually had relatively few changes in patch 1.2, and so of course we are still running an extremely similar Twisting Blades focused build, with a couple of changes here or there to fit some of what is going on in Season 2, and of course we'll also be talking about Vampiric Powers a bit later on as well, so you know what is looking strong and which ones to aim for, not just on rogue, but specifically for this early leveling stage of the rogue. Starting off then, we'll go over your skills and leveling order, so you know what to pick up and when. Then we'll talk about the specialization choice for this build, follow that up with the small bit of codex-based legendaries that you can get to really boost the build up, and then we'll talk about Vampiric Powers and what we think we're going to want to build around here as this class and this build, and then just how to play the build with any tips that I have from my time with it myself. Without further ado then, let's talk about the skill points. Starting off with, you of course want to stick a point in puncture, as well as an enhanced puncture. Then we want our first rank of Twisting Blades as our main damaging ability, and then we also want enhanced Twisting Blades to increase the return damage by 30%, and then we're going to be taking advanced Twisting Blades for now for the cooldown reduction on our other skills, but know that later on we will be switching this one over to improved Twisting Blades instead for the daze chance and synergies that it offers. Then we're going to be grabbing Fundamental Puncture for the vulnerability proc. Even with the changes in Season 2, vulnerable as a base status is still incredible to apply to enemies, so this is still pretty invaluable, especially early on. After that, you want to be grabbing a rank in Dash, but we're not going to be taking any enhancements. We mainly want this just for the extra mobility that it offers, and mobility is especially strong when leveling, as speed is the main heart of battle in this situation. Instead, we're just going to stick the remainder of these skill points here for the next couple of levels into Twisting Blades to max it out up to 5 to give us a massive damage boost on our main damage dealer. After that, we unlock the next node cluster, and here we are immediately going to be grabbing Poison Trap, which serves as an excellent increase to our single target damage, but also to the larger groups of mobs if you can get them rounded up nicely. Then we're also going to be grabbing Dark Shroud for defense and movement speed, which is just pretty hard to argue against. We're also grabbing Enhanced Dark Shroud, which gives these shadows a chance to not be used when you get hit, then also Subverting Dark Shroud, which gives you a bonus extra movement speed, 4% per extra shadow, really solid, and again, movement speed is really good while leveling, even better than it is while, just existing at a higher level. We are also going to be grabbing Enhanced Poison Trap then for the knockdown that it gives on enemies that are hit by it, for a little bit of bonus CC and some synergies with other abilities. Into the next node cluster then, we're going to be grabbing Shadow Imbuement. Even while leveling, this is fantastic as it really adds to your group clearing ability, and a lot of leveling is just slaughtering large groups of enemies as fast as you can while running as fast as you can. We also grab Enhanced Shadow Imbuement for 15% extra crit chance against injured enemies with the shadow dot on them, and then also Blended Shadow Imbuement, which makes enemies that are hit by the Shadow Imbuement explosion vulnerable for 2 seconds, just letting us increase our vulnerable uptime even further on enemies because it's really important to have. Then we're going to be taking 1 rank of the Shadowcrafts passive, mostly just as a gateway to put 3 ranks into Consuming Shadows. This gives you 30 energy generation anytime an enemy dies from your shadow damage, helping out a lot with the early energy management issues that Rogue can have. After that, we skip out on ultimate skills, at least as actives for now, so it's time to pick up a load of passives here. First up, 3 ranks of the Trap Mastery skill. This gives you a whopping 12% bonus crit chance on vulnerable and crowd controlled enemies for 4 seconds after your Poison Trap triggers. This applies to the knockdown from Poison Trap itself, and also to the dazed enemies from Twisting Blades once we swap that over in a moment. So this is just a ton of bonus crit chance, which is fantastic early on when your gear provides nothing else of much value. 1 point in Adrenaline Rush then, mostly just as a gateway to be able to get 3 ranks of haste, which is fantastic. While at 50% or above max energy, you get 15% increased movement speed. Below 50% max energy, you get 15% increased attack speed, which is fantastic for us. After that, we round back up, and we're going to be wanting to get 3 ranks of the Concussive passive. This makes it so when you knock back or knock down an enemy, you get 12% increased crit chance against that enemy for 3 seconds, which again applies mostly to our Poison Trap knockdown for now, creating a really nice burst combo for us to take advantage of, but we're going to be adding more ways to take advantage of this later. Then we unlock our key passive, so we're going to be going with Momentum. You get a bunch of buffs when Momentum has full stacks, and you get stacks from hitting enemies under certain conditions, one of which you will notice is, well, dazed. So let's see how much we can dig into that concept, shall we? quickly. First, we're going to be grabbing Enhanced Dash. This gives us 15% increased crit damage against enemies hit by our dash for 5 seconds, really solid. Then also Discipline Dash, which slows enemies but also dazes any enemies that were already slowed if they're hit by your dash. You can easily apply this either through dashing twice or even just through following a Puncture slow proc. On top of that, we are also going to swap Advanced Twisting Blades over here to instead be Improved Twisting Blades now that we have our Daze synergies unlocked. This really helps build our momentum stacks. Then we're also going to be getting 1 rank of the Exploit passive as a start, just as a gateway to getting 3 ranks of Malice for a beautiful 9% increased damage against vulnerable enemies. The way that we have this build, the way that we're going to continue to build it, enemies are going to be vulnerable a lot. Extra damage against them, especially a multiplier, is exceptional. Then we're going to be putting the other 2 ranks into Exploit to fill that out afterwards, which will just get a nice bit of bonus damage to any enemy that is above 80% health or below 35%, which covers more than half of a health bar of an average enemy, so it is a solid increase for sure. After that, we're going to be sticking a point into countering Poison Trap for a 30% chance to reset our Shadow Imbuement cooldown when the trap is activated, which is solid for obvious reasons. And then we'll do the fun thing and round back over here to grab 1 rank of Rapid Gambits. This gives you a 0.5 second reduction to our dash cooldown whenever you daze an enemy, and 1 rank of Trick Attacks as well, which knocks down any dazed enemy if you get a crit against them, creating a ton of synergy between our daze effects, our crit increases, and our increased crit damage against any enemy that suffers a knockdown as well. After that, we grab 3 points in the Weapon Mastery passive over here. This just gives you some nice passive damage bonuses, and generally speaking, both the dagger and sword bonuses are really good. We aren't quite sure yet whether dual daggers or dual swords will be the way in Season 2 with the way that the damage buckets have changed, but for the first 50 levels at least, it's mostly just use whichever one of them has the highest item power that you find, and therefore will do the most damage. After that, we're going to be grabbing 3 ranks in the Sturdy passive just for a nice bit of 12% damage reduction from close enemies, then also 3 points into Stutter Step over here, making your crits give you a 15% movement speed bonus for 4 seconds, just really solid, because at this point, you just have so much movement speed even as a base as a rogue, you will start to be absolutely silly compared to every other class as far as just running. For a character, not even World Tier 3 yet as well. Then we're going to be maxing out Siphoning Strikes for the 85% lucky hit chance to heal for 3% maximum life when you critically strike a close enemy, and then after that, we're going to be spending our last final point on just getting 1 extra rank on Rapid Gambits, just for a little bit more dodge cooldown reduction, just for a bit more technical movement speed, as movement speed itself is huge in the leveling experience. That's all of your skill points then, so let's talk about your specialization for this. The best one by far for this build in this style is Inner Sight. This of course marks a random enemy on your screen and builds up a gauge as you do damage. Once the gauge is full, you get unlimited energy for 4 seconds. The only thing stopping this build, even early on, is energy management, and Inner Sight helps quite a fair bit with this, not to mention the massive burst damage period that you get whenever the unlimited energy buff triggers. With that then, let's talk about your legendaries of choice and where you can find them. As we are focusing on legendaries that we know to be in the codex that will definitely be there, it's worth mentioning that in Season 1, the earliest chapters of the season journey also gave us bonus legendary powers in our codex that were not there before the season. So it's entirely possible that once the season is live, Season 2, we'll find out that there is a really strong power in the codex that isn't normally, so this is based on the base codex, but keep an eye on the seasonal journey to see if anything there would be worth slotting in. That said, we are only covering 3 slots as this is a level 1 to 50 build, and the only 3 pieces of gear that aren't really detrimental to avoid swapping out are your rings and amulet, which serve excellently as legendary holders for the early game. On your amulet then, for a bonus 50% effectiveness, we have the Blade Dancer aspect. This makes your twisting blades orbit you for a brief period after they return, doing damage based on the return damage of the blades itself, and depending on the distance that it traveled, the damage increases even more too. This just massively boosts your damage output as a twisting blade focused build, because you're going to be shoving your twisting blades every which way while moving quickly through the battlefield anyways. Then you want to have the Edge Master aspect. This gives you up to 20% bonus damage depending on how much of your resource is full when you cast a skill. Ideally, our goal is to always cast twisting blades at full energy to make the most out of this. Then finally we have the Ravenous aspect. This makes energy regen increase by up to 70% for 4 seconds after you kill a vulnerable enemy. The Blade Dancer aspect comes from Jalal's Vigil in Skosglen, the Edge Master aspect comes from Old Stones in Skosglen as well, and then the Ravenous aspect is from Shifting City in the Dry Steppes, all of which you should be able to access extremely early on, as Season 1 at least, they unexpectedly removed all the level requirements of different areas in the game for low level characters, and if that's 6 for Season 2, you can sort of just beeline your actual codex powers. With all that covered then, let's talk about Vampiric Powers. And to best do this, I'm going to sort of make a priority list of which powers affect you the most, and so they are the ones that you want to get the soonest. We don't know the specifics of how to get every single Vampiric power, then we know that most of them will be able to bot with a season specific currency, meaning that you do have some level of choice in the matter. The best power for Rogue then is almost definitely the combo of Accursed Touch, a major power for 6 divinity packs that gives you 44% lucky hit chance to inflict Vampiric Curse on enemies, giving the enemies a chance to spread the curse as well, and increasing the damage of Accursed Souls, which is something that you build up by using the Vampiric Curse mechanic, and then Prey on the Weak for 2 Ferocity packs. This gives you a 16% damage bonus against enemies that are vulnerable, and it makes any enemy that is affected by Vampiric Curses also become vulnerable. That, combined with our other sources, should create near full vulnerable uptime on most enemies. Aside from those two, the next best is Ravenous for 3 Ferocity packs. Lucky hit, 20% chance to increase your attack speed by 40% of your total movement speed, which is obviously great for us. We have a lot of movement speed, we love attack speed, and we get a ton of bonus movement speed even early on to make this quite strong. Past that, we have our second best major vampiric power for this build, which is Metamorphosis. 2 Ferocity packs, 2 Divinity packs, and 2 Eternity packs. When evading, you turn into a cloud of bats, becoming unstoppable for 4 seconds and inflicting Vampiric Curse on enemies in the evade path. The unstoppable granted by this is absolutely fantastic, especially with our inbuilt evade cooldown reductions within this build, but this is definitely secondary to the 3 powers I listed before it. Then for your last slot, you have a couple of choices depending on whether you want offense or survivability. For offense, there is the Terror power for 1 Ferocity, 1 Divinity, and 1 Eternity pack. When struck, you have a 14% chance to fear all nearby enemies and also slow them by 80% for 2 seconds, and you have guaranteed critical strikes on feared enemies. This just works for us with the synergy of crits and our ability to daze slow enemies, really strong interaction with how we already work really. Alternatively, you could go for Undying for just 1 Eternity pact, which makes any skill that you cast heal you for 3% of your life, doubled effectiveness if you're under 50% health. That is just sort of your priority order for vampiric powers depending on what is available and how early on. Follow it as best as you can, and of course feel free to mess around with other powers too along the way if you just want to see how they work. As far as playing the build for yourself then, this one is really just quite simple. Poison Trap functions sort of as a damage cooldown, Shadow Imbuement is great when you see a nice big group of enemies, Dark Shroud always should be active if possible, and aside from that, it's just dash if you need to for movement, Puncture if you don't have high energy, Twisting Blades if you do have high energy, and try your best to stay mobile as much as possible in combat too. It's not too complicated at any point, really. Honestly, at the end of the day, only a slight variation from the rogue leveling build that we recommended last season, but this works in a couple of different synergies as well, using passive skills and especially synergies with the vampiric powers that we're going to get within this season. I hope you've enjoyed this, of course, and I hope you enjoy using this build if you take it out for a spin yourself tomorrow or whenever you start with Season 2 on your own. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.